Delgado and a few banks had to replace their windows. Civil disobedience followed, and in the end, teachers were paid, but the sales tax got approved. That process at least laid the ground to build the 2008 teacher strike. The FMPR had begun negotiating. The FMPR had begun negotiating their new collective bargaining agreement in 2005, yet the negotiations needed advance. The government agenda was to privatize schools and reduce the size of the Department of Education. The FMPR developed a strategic movement where support for the strike kept growing with each passing moment. In January 2008, the union was decertified, and 2 months before the strike began. Internal and external forces combined to defeat the strike and divide the once largest force of the working class. Today, the FMPR is fighting for survival. It represents nearly 2,000 teachers out of the 30,000 that remain after years of attrition in the workforce. Strikes are the university of the working class. The culture of resistance spreads, and that empowers people. Both the university strike and the Teachers Federation strike are the forefathers, or maybe the foremothers, of the university strikes of 2010 against austerity. Law number 7 and its implications against the UPR once again became the subject of harsh fights against austerity. Today, we see a similar movement against Law 66, the most recent version of the austerity and exception laws enacted to destroy what's left of the working class rights and its living standards. Unfortunately, the students are not as politicized as they were in the 70s or in the 80s or even the 2000s, but they have a seasoned leadership and the will to fight, and that is really important. The situation has become increasingly political. To this day, the discussion in the media is about economy, the bonds, unemployment, and even the distribution of wealth. Although the media is highly biased towards the colonial capitalist ideology, there remain some counter voices to be heard. The Puerto Rican Independence Party and the Working People's Party will go into this election with an agenda against austerity. In my humble opinion, neither gives a complete answer to the situation. If the colony is about to collapse, an absolute power held by Congress is soon to be granted to a small board of capitalists. Why do we want to see a collapsed structure? Of the two, I see the Independence Party presenting the situation a bit better. The root cause of all evil is colonialism, and only in independence can we seek to solve the problem that haunts us. On the other hand, the PPT, the Workers' Party, aims at rebuilding the benefactor state with neo-Keynesian economic reforms, but evades the smelly corpse of the Estado Libre Asociado, or the Commonwealth. That view is full of contradictions, since opposing colonialism without presenting an alternative other than a referendum or a constituent assembly does not answer the question of how to solve this crisis definitively. This is a debate within the organization right now. In our regard, independence is not enough, as we have seen in Greece, Spain, Venezuela, or even Cuba. A radical democratic state with a drive towards collective solution where real power is on the hands of the working class and the people is the best way to solve not the colonial crisis, but the real problems of the majority. I must reiterate the importance of anti-colonialism. Even in a situation as specific as public school administration, it has high relevance. It is of no secret that public schools have lost the little prestige they had. Teachers are demoralized, students don't believe in them, parents have lost their faith. I try to be an exception as a teacher every day, but I have to say that I'm rowing against the tide, and it's really difficult. It is a fact that public schools in Puerto Rico have gone down the hill during the last 16 years. I'm not talking about standardized testing. I'm talking about the opinion of teachers, university professors, and the perception of the administration. The real reason are the 15 years of the No Child Left Behind Act and the privatization of services in schools. Corruption has increased and education has decreased. And we have no way of amending or even repealing that law in Puerto Rico. I do not hold the power of foresight, but some things are as predictable as Latin American soap operas. Government will run out of money at some point. We have been expecting a lockout for some time, but government has bought time. Regardless, a government lockout without payment to public workers could become the basis for social unrest. The effects in the economy will be catastrophic, since the state has been the driving force, and commerce depends on payday. Immigration and crimes against property will increase, and that will have an effect on business, as a larger fraction of the budget has to be destined to private security. Organized labor has to recognize the political situation that it is in. There are no solutions that could guarantee each sector separately. This situation is as classist as it can be. Only by developing a working class movement with general and political working class demand can we stop or at least slow down the attacks towards our standards of living. I don't care if it's a foreign control board or a local law that implements austerity. The problem is what effect it will have on each one of us, and that is what we should be fighting against. What we need in Puerto Rico is a mass movement that goes beyond organized labor. If the situation right now has shown itself as a clearly political one, the answer has to be political also. There are no technical or economic solutions without imposing austerity to one or other branch of the working class. Unions and political organizations have to recognize the structural changes in the working class and adapt to them. We need at least another people's strike, or people's movement, just like Vieques, the 2010 student strike, or the telephone strike. Those events have to be recognized as what they were. A small struggle became the spark of a larger one, where many tactics developed together towards a common aim. I see two social groups that have potential but not the level of organization required to become those parts. University students, because of their will to fight, and because of they are the new generation which awaits either leaving the island or taking underpaid jobs. On the other hand, teachers, which as a social group have a lot of political strength, but are slow to move and difficult to convince. In recent years, the teachers have received a lot of hate and not a single salary raise in over 8 years. Organizing a movement that has in its own demands, but also conscious of the larger issue, is not an easy task. I believe that we must not only answer the immediate questions, but the long-term ones. What could solve the problem we live in? And to finish, granted that we do not have a socialist society, that we do not have the power to seize the means of production, a minimal program can be enacted that at least helps us rebuild a politicized working class movement. I could list a few of those demands. Not a single dime given to Wall Street, levy tax on the rich, particularly on corporations and bank profit, stop privatization and revert as many as possible, rebuild the economy with diverse and technologically advanced agriculture, create a universal healthcare system and universal retirement pension fund, enact a tuition-adjusted to income system in the public universities, enact a moratorium in the housing mortgage debt and seize the excess inventory held by banks, combine measures to strengthen savings with investments in manufacture by means of the credit unions cooperatives and workers-owned ventures, protections of basic goods produced in the island. Some of these may be in contradiction with the colonial status of Puerto Rico, but that is precisely the point.
So after this excellent, provocative interventions, we are opening the floor for questions and comments. So I'm going to break the ice.
A question for both. Thank you for the presentation. Very informative. We got to see a presentation a lot, in particular for Professor Pantojas, explanation of a lot of the local explanations for the crisis. We know about the corruption. We know that they've played the game of quítate tú, poneme yo, and wasted a lot of the money on the special programs that you guys described in a lot of details. We haven't heard a lot, at least in the U.S. media. I never see it in the U.S. media. I see it in some of the sectors, some of the leftist newspapers in Puerto Rico, regarding the part of the problem or part of the fault that comes from the United States. Now it's popular to talk about the cabotage laws. The independent movement has been talking about it since the 70s or before, but now it's popular because it's a reality. It's making our products cost a lot more. But there's no long-term discussion about the 118 years of colonialism and the effects it's had in terms of the extraction of value, labor power, consumer products, etc., to the United States, and how that has contributed. That one part has contributed to the crisis as well. And two, the lack of sovereign powers in terms of not being able to find preferential contracts, preferential markets in the world. Take the example of Singapore, which used the Puerto Rico model, as you had mentioned, to at least develop to a certain stage, but around the 1970s, they kind of realized there was a limit to what they could do without sovereign powers, and they went forward and developed an economy that's, I think if I'm correct, doubled the economy of Puerto Rico, and they're only about 15 or 16 times smaller than Puerto Rico. So the overpopulation argument doesn't work with them because they're practically even smaller than us. So I guess the question, a double question, is what are some of the examples of U.S. imperial control and consequences for extraction of value and resources that could have been used in Puerto Rico and that have contributed to this crisis? And two, what are some examples of things that can be done in terms of short-term within the colonial status, and then talking to your point at the end, long-term. Where is this leading us politically in terms of what solutions we have long-term to try to implement more power for ourselves and keep more of the resources that we produce in Puerto Rico in Puerto Rico? And this is open to both.
I mean, what the problem is after 1952, Puerto Rico colonialism after World War II, post-colonial colonialism, so to speak, created a situation where colonies, not only Puerto Rico, the French colonies, the British colonies, were better off than their independent neighbors, but worse off than, but not equal to the metropolis. And so, to a certain extent, as we all thought of colonialism as the wretched of the earth model, sheer exploitation, we thought that somehow these were successful colonies. But colonialism is a contradictory element. So in that sense, there was wealth created in Puerto Rico. The only problem is that the lion's share of that wealth went to capital. And I think that the numbers are compelling in terms of the declining share of the Puerto Rican produced wealth that gets to wages, to labor, as opposed to the one that goes to capital. That is a law of capitalism. So the problem now is, are the Americans to blame? Are they part of it? I don't want to get the Puerto Rican elite off the hook, because not only are these people corrupt, but let me ask you a question. I have an article, and it's in the website, in the book page. You can access the link, called "Is Puerto Rico Greece in the Caribbean?" One of the key elements and the key differences of Puerto Rico and Greece is the fact that the person who negotiated on behalf of Greece with the triad, with the Troika, was Tripas. It wasn't the corrupt government. It was a new socialist government. They didn't win, but they negotiated. Puerto Ricans, we keep electing corrupt officials. And what is interesting, what is paradoxical, is that the elite that is negotiating in Washington on behalf of Puerto Rico is the same corrupt elite. So I don't like to call Puerto Rico Puerto Rico. It is not a question of helping Puerto Rico or not helping Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is not all made by one group of people. The problem is that the working class and the discontents are in disarray. We've not been able to somehow come with a proposal to confront the issue. So, trying to blame the Americans now, yeah, they are to blame, but it is the Puerto Rican elite that got us into this pickle. The Puerto Rican elite had the collaboration of American financial corporations. If you look at the article that I was quoting in English, you would see that companies, the financial companies that sold the bonds for Puerto Rico, would charge more in terms of the fees and the transaction fees and the different costs that are there than the average. These people make over $1 billion selling Puerto Rican bonds. So yes, that is a problem. On the other hand, you have the hedge funds. But you also, and you also have the sort of the rich coming to Puerto Rico to pay only 4% and to purchase the spoils at discount prices. But you know who's selling the spoils at discount prices? The wife of the resident commissioner. 5 days after he's sworn in, she incorporated a company, and it's actually advising hedge funds not on the issue of bonds, but on the issue of real estate. So she is selling real estate to the vultures, and that came out in the New York Times recently. And the problem is that there is no conflict of interest apparently. And I asked someone in Washington that I know, and he says, this is peanuts. This is $5 million. It's not a big deal here, because all congressmen do it. So the problem is, and I think that this is what it's important about what my colleague was saying, there is a problem in terms of the political model and the economic model, and it's not just Puerto Rico. The question is, now we need to come up, like the Greek tried to do. They haven't succeeded, but they tried, with a new political project, which cannot be neo-Keynesian, which cannot be socialist in the old way. I mean, not even in Venezuela or Ecuador, it has tried. So we need to come up with, our generation, I'm almost done, but the younger generation, he has the task, he and his generation have the task of coming up with a new solution. The old solutions are not working. Any one of them are not working. So that's the only answer I have. I'm sorry.
Yes, I think that one of the reasons I said that it's really difficult to define colonialism is because I think who's responsible for the crisis in Puerto Rico and the corruption you just mentioned is all intertwined together. The structure of colonialism in Puerto Rico built corruption. If you find, for example, the law I just mentioned, the law of the No Child Left Behind. No Child Left Behind basically created or expanded corruption within the public schools. You have a group of companies that were just created for the law to provide services for the students who never gave the services, who the students didn't need it, tutoring, which was not for what the people in the island needed. But the money was there, and you had to use it. And you needed the money because you needed to create jobs and you needed to move the economy. So I think that corruption may have worsened the situation, but I think that most of the fault lies on those who benefited from all. And the Puerto Rican bourgeois, the richest in Puerto Rico, a small segment of it, did benefit it. But even them are within a colonial relationship with their counterparts. They're not the bigger bourgeois in the United States, the bigger richest. For example, the Banco Popular maybe makes number 30 in the banks in the United States, Banco Popular. And it has been like that since almost quite some time. But when you see the bigger banks have separated themselves from Popular, so you see that there is an accumulation of wealth in Puerto Rico. But when you compare it to the United States, it's much bigger. And another reason that I say that the fault may lie combined between the political class, the political sector, the rich people in Puerto Rico, and the people in the United States that sold the bonds. One of the conditions that Moody's and the other accrediting agencies gave Puerto Rico to not decrease its rating was to take more debt. So you had to take more debt, not to decrease your rating, but if you took it, you will anyway reduce the debt because you couldn't pay. So what's the deal? And many of the decisions taken in the Puerto Rico Electrical Power Authority, in the Aqueduct Authority, in the Department of Education, were decisions that were taken either by the federal government, consulted with the federal government, or were suggested by many of these bond issuers. Because it's their money, they are the ones who have to protect their investment, and they have a lot of power. They even elect people to the boards, to the governing boards. So, and you look at the governing boards in any one of these authorities, and they are not just politicians. Many of them come from the private sector and are related to many of the institutions that gave the bonds. So I say that this situation is part or is the evolving stage, an evolving stage of the Puerto Rican colonialism, where all the wealth and all the investments have been already capitalized, and what's behind doesn't produce. So you need a new wave, and that's one of the problems that I see, that it's really difficult to find a short-term solution. I don't see a short-term solution.
Right.
Even the short-term solutions that I may think are could benefit the working class immediately will eventually become will sink even more the situation of the government. I'm not saying that we have to tell the government don't pay me or do not give me a salary raise. No, is that you have to one has to understand that the situation the government is in has like a date put in the table, that at some point either a corporation in the United States decides to make huge investment in Puerto Rico, and I think an economist already made the number that how much they have to invest in Puerto Rico to rebuild it, or the federal government decides to pay the debt or approve a governing board that will take away all our rights and reduce the cost of the working force, so that capitalists in Puerto Rico could gain again. And I think this Puerto Rico was the lab of globalization, of current globalization. What happens in Puerto Rico, you said it, what's gone on in Singapore, in all the Asian countries, was experimented in Puerto Rico. And right now, Puerto Rico is left behind, or maybe not. Some of those countries you mentioned have an even bigger separation of the wealth.
I wanted to mention something. I remember a debate in Puerto Rico many years ago. Juan, Roberto, Romero Barceló, Hernández Colón. And the things we're talking about now, we're talking 30 plus years back, was exactly this. Maribra and Rubén Berrío were talking about la colonia va a seguir acocotándose until it can't go any further. And that seemed like fiction back then, to the people that were living. The people went and elected Barceló and Hernández Colón, which is what we've been doing forever, PNP, PPD. But this has been a time bomb that we've been sitting on for decades. Since I was in college, I mean, I remember there's nothing new. This could be La Yupi, 1970 something, escuchando lo mismo. The other thing I wanted to mention, 2 days ago I saw on CNN the first ad, don't bail out Puerto Rico. And I remember I ran to the TV, ¿qué es esto? There's a campaign right now against Puerto Rico, a big campaign.
So who's doing that campaign? That's what I've heard. I've seen a lot.
I wrote down the name. It's an organization.
Right.
The thing is the following. There are people who purchase the bonds at face value. So they pay $100 for a $100 bond at 2%. That was the rate. The going was good. In the last bond issue, 2013, I think it was, the rate was about 8%. The problem is that since then, especially after the governor said in July of 2015 that the debt was unpayable, people have been unloading the bonds. And they've been purchased, they've been sliding down, and now there are people buying bonds, Puerto Rican bonds at 40 and 30 cents on the dollar. The government does not have a Chapter 9. The government of Puerto Rico cannot go bankrupt. They could decide not to pay, but they would have to go to court, and courts are likely to rule that the Puerto Ricans have to pay. And so what the Puerto Rican government was asking originally was to create a bankruptcy law that would allow the 8 public corporations in Puerto Rico to go bankrupt, to force the bondholders to negotiate and to take a cut on the debt. Eventually, that didn't fly. It was actually revoked by the federal court, and it's in the Supreme Court. So they tried the Congress route, and they proposed that. And then they proposed a second alternative in 2015, saying we want the Puerto Rico government, which is called Super Chapter 9, the Puerto Rican government to go all bankrupt. Not only the public corporations, but the central government debt. No one, and this is why everyone is against everyone. The hedge funds pretend that they bought at 40 cents and they want to collect at $1. That's more than 150% interest gain. And not even interest, I mean just on the principal. So the big wrangling there is, okay, we cannot let the hedge funds win, but on the other hand, we cannot let the original bondholders lose. And that's the big thing. The other element is the Republicans. The Republicans are saying, we're not going to bail out Puerto Rico or anyone else. Obama and his administration, the Treasury Department, is saying, oh, we're not going to bail them out, but let's give them something. And this is where things stand. At the moment, the Republicans have the upper hand because they control. So nothing seems to be happening. Today there was going to be a meeting. It is a big mess. It is a big mess. On the other hand, my big problem, and I am going to say something that will be controversial in the state, but I'm known for that. The discontents in Puerto Rico are not discontent. Do you agree with me? Or do you seem to be agreeing? Right. This morning I woke up and the chambermaid in the hotel at UMass was a Puerto Rican who came here 10 months ago. So the discontents in Puerto Rico are leaving. They are coming to the United States. They are talking about a humanitarian crisis. Okay. And you understand that. And there seems to be a humanitarian crisis. There is no money to pay the buses for the public school children to go to school. There is no money to pay the teachers, the special education teachers, which are even more critical.
They haven't been paid.
But, there is money to pay $90,000 to the former mayor of San Juan as a consultant of a municipality where the mayor, who is a school dropout, a university dropout, makes $9,000 a month. So the problem is that there is money. The allocation of the money is the problem. So in that sense, and this is why they do not present the audited statements. And that is what the government of Washington knows. Because in 2013, the Obama government sent to Puerto Rico 65 federal monitors to help Puerto Ricans do more with less. But these people found out exactly what was happening. Let me give you another example. In Puerto Rico has more healthcare centers per inhabitant than Massachusetts or than any other state of the union. Because every doctor opens one and gets funds from ARRA and from Obamacare and from this and from that, and so what you have is a scam. No? And the 2010 leaders of the strike, the future of Puerto Rico, these radicals, you know what? They are all government employees now.
Not all.
Well, there may be not all, but the ones that I know are there. They drive a Lexus, and now the government is trying to make them, to give them, in the University of Puerto Rico, we, the decent people, have a big fight, because they are trying to place them in tenure track lines over procedure. These are the leaders. The problem is that there is plenty of money in Puerto Rico to be co-opted.
Stolen.
I wanted to be nice after this. But that is the problem. You see, this is not a neat and easy problem. And the left in Puerto Rico, the discontents, have not been able, at this moment, the PNP, the BPD, the discontents, the discontents have four options. How do you think this is going to split? So you have the two traditional parties who get 90% of the vote, and the other 10% is going to be split among four options. How is this going to work? What is the front? That's the problem. The unions are divided between the AFL-CIO and the others. This is a big problem. We need to come up with the will to create some kind of an alternative. The thing is, let me turn it on. I didn't realize it was I apologize. So that's part of the problem. Part of the problem that we have is that we've not been able, none of us have been able to come up with a plan. I'm not talking about a political project, I'm not talking about a movement, with a plan to get together on the same table to talk about the same issues. We talk past each other.
Hugo, you want to say something?
Yes, I would like to reply to that.
Absolutely, I didn't expect anything less. It is very what I'm saying is very controversial.
No, I agree with the beginning. I think that in Puerto Rico, people want the governing board. That's a fact. If you ask anyone in the street, people will say, oh, let the federals come and they will solve the corruption problem. Now, if you ask them issue by issue, you tell them, okay, what if the government board fires employees? No, I'm against that. What if they close the schools? No, I'm against that. Every single thing that the governing board is going to do, the people are against it. So people are not aware yet of what the situation or what the federal government is trying to do with Puerto Rico. And maybe that's one of the problems. We as political opposition probably have not been able to transmit that message. And that's something that we have to solve. And I think that the university students that right now are developing their struggle are one of maybe the space where that opposition could coalesce and bring together many forces, just as they did in 2010. Now I want to go to 2010 because to me it's really important. One of the brothers in my organization, or at least I would like to think that my organization organized that strike. Arturo Rio Piedras, the guy he mentions, the guy who I will say he's a friend. He was one of the leaders of the law school group within the strike. I think he was already influenced by the PPD. I think that Arturo Rios and that sector, even one of the right now at the he's in Congress right now in Puerto Rico, was one of the members of the law group. I think they were organized within the strike from the Partido Popular to co-opt the strike, because this was during Luis Fortuño's administration, and of course we knew it. And back then, at the time, we knew that there were people there that were there just because they wanted to take down Fortuño and bring the other one. That didn't mean that you were going to stop the strike, and the strike was really important, not only in the sense that it stopped many of the attempts to increase costs to reduce services, but in the sense that it built many of the leadership that we see now within teachers, within the new student movement. So I don't think that all of them are part of the government. I think there are a few of them, and that has been so since the strike or even before the strike, and that will happen in the future. That's normal in all social struggle. There's people that maybe go into the social struggle to benefit themselves. I think that the problem we have in Puerto Rico is, as I said, solutions to the problem, and even with what the professor said that there may be money. But how much time can that money buy? Even if you stop at zero corruption right now, how much money that represents? How many years or how many months does it have for the government to run out of money? Because every single measure that has been taken during the last few years, every increase in taxes, every law of like law number 7 or law number 66 has worsened the situation, because the working class has been reduced. You don't have corporations, you don't have taxes, the government is running out of money, and as every time you make a law that the working people feels threatened, they do what they just said, people abandon the island. So you have a reduced working force. One may question if the new stage that we may go into may even require everyone in Puerto Rico to question their standard of living. I think in Puerto Rico the standard of living may be above, and I'm not saying that I'm not going against school, against hospitals. I mean more the consumption of goods, particularly. Puerto Rico is an extremely consumption-dependent society. The expenditures in almost everything is really big, and I think that's one of the things that Puerto Ricans have to ask. You go to a housing project, and probably all the kids have Jordans, but they're probably not well fed. So I think that those are things that are controversial too, and that's part of the way we have to rethink Puerto Rico. And as I said, the solution has to be with new jobs, not with job destruction. And every single measure that has been taken has destructed jobs, and not in the sense of bringing new corporations to continue the cycle, the colonial cycle, which is, as I said, not a cycle but a slide down. Because when in the past, as I said, this has happened. And in the 1940s, the sugar corporation left and left behind impoverished people. Then the Operation Bootstrap came, and a huge investment in the economy. Then you had it again with the oil companies came to Puerto Rico to process oil. Then you have the 936. Each time, big corporations came into Puerto Rico to invest money to create the jobs were created. There was a small surge in the economy in Puerto Rico, but that is not sustained within a longer time. Once those companies get their return on their investment, they leave. There's nothing that can hold them in Puerto Rico. That's the reason they went there, just to make their profits.
Let me say something that I would like your opinions. I have been following the Puerto Rican situation for a long time, and I am flabbergasted and mystified about, I wouldn't call it passivity, but there are some problems they are about the syndrome of victimization. Many Puerto Ricans, they are always complaining, but they go through the same political parties. And probably 2 months after the election, they apparently feel the sensation of shame, and then nobody voted for Fortunio, or nobody voted for Alejandro Garcia Padilla. And the Janten last probably 4 years, the complaining and the bitter complaint, and then they repeat the cycle. So why the victimization syndrome? First question. The second issue is that at this very moment, the police department is under federal monitor. The utility monopoly is the only monopoly in the whole world that is bankrupt. They don't have any competition, and it is bankrupt. The only monopoly in the world. That shows the collective intelligence of the political elite in Puerto Rico. It's under another monitor, basically imposed by the creditors.
Very expensive money.
Special education has been investigated because of the corrupt practices. Medicare has been apparently a cash flow for many doctors. So corruption is something embedded, ingrained, as you were mentioning, in the psyche or political fabric of the island. Lane number 7 Act by Fortunio was basically imposed by the external capitalists. Law 66 was imposed by the creditors. The pension plans of the Alejandro Garcia Padilla's administration imposed by external forces. So that is not a major piece of legislation in Puerto Rico in the past 8 years. That was not imposed by basically the outside creditors who are interested in protecting their investment. So that is the meaning and the consequence is that democracy in Puerto Rico is basically a charade. And now we have the Financial Oversight Board that is going basically to be a monitor for the whole island. I read the draft, and they are saying we need to protect the rule of law. You know what that means? That means repression for people who protest. We need to protest property. Rule of law also means property rights, and we need to protect the investments. we are going to work in conjunction with, coordination with the governor and the National Assembly, but we are going to have the final say in the final decisions. So what about the possibility that the Puerto Rican people might say, let's cancel the elections? Because the National Assembly is going to be just a joke there. What about the possibility? And let's colonialism in its nakedness and purity show its and display its face and reality. And then to the other issue, just to conclude this, Emilio, I don't think that Puerto Rico needs a plan. That's like Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton has a plan for everything.
Happy by
well prepared. I have a say, okay. No, the issue is not a plan, because Puerto Rico is probably the most fully analyzed country in the whole world. We have proposals probably in the hundreds, in the thousands. Going back to environmental protections and energy protection from the 1970s. So the question is not to imply or to impose or to suggest rationality to the Puerto Rican people. My question is if there is something deeper here that somehow colonialism poisons in so deep a way our collective psyches that we are unable now to come up with a collective will to fight, no proposal. That's very easy to design. Collective will. And my contrast is that in 1938, the Puerto Rican people with less education and less health was willing to go for a new political party that was representing at the moment Partido Popular Democrático 1938 against the corruption of the Partido Liberal and Partido Socialista. Why the Puerto Rican people at this moment is so paralyzed?
Those are the last interventions. I'm going to add, because I think that that's very precisely put your questions. I just want to add two touches to them. By asking the corollary to each of them. To Hugo, I mean, you are highlighting the collective actors, students and workers, especially teachers, but there seems to be other collective actors emerging in the process which go beyond this, what a colleague who died, Emilio Gonzalez, called Estado de los Partidos, the state of the parties. I mean, going beyond political organization, there seem to be emerging, a little bit of a more positive tone again, and this is a good counterpoint between some kind of a colonial inability to always forces emerging from Puerto Rican society to fight that. There seems to be all sorts of coalitions emerging on the name of citizens, of new agriculture, of feminism, addressing all of these forms of oppression that you mentioned, Hugo. I mean, in terms of race, we had the first Congress of Afro-descendant Puerto Ricans in November, etc. That speak against all different dimensions of colonialism and can potentially put together different forms of resistance to colonialism, these different responses in the 21st century to Puerto Rican late colonialism, the post-colonial colony, to use Emilio's language. So what, I mean, are there other actors here, basically, those who can champion actually that possibility, the possibility of something else coming out of this crisis? Because the crisis always have the potential of something radically different coming up. I mean, I think that kind of radical hope is important also to have it in mind. People may also surprise you in ways that you do not expect. And to Emilio, I mean, you mentioned I heard you on the one hand talking about the possibilities of short-term responses that we're not really doing, and then I was left with the desire to hear more. But also at the end, you were talking about other options beyond post-Keynesian, neo-Keynesian kind of neo-developmentalist alternative, which is what I see happening in Ecuador and in Bolivia and Venezuela and in the so-called pink tide of Latin America. I mean, and beyond the old 20th century socialism. So what, and I'm not asking, of course, for formulas, but what do you have in mind when you say that? And it's not a plan, but it's a project. I mean, what is the project what is the horizon? What are we looking for? What are the new alternatives that we have? And Puerto Rico can be actually an important starting point for that, because it was, as both of you said, the colonial lab of developmentalism and neoliberalism. And the Puerto Rican crisis can be of tremendous lessons, for what are the possibilities of futures that we have now.
Excuse me, but we can be talking about this for years, and we don't do anything.
Yeah, no, we're all doing something on our own trenches. I will say, I'm not entirely. This is doing something.
I know.
Finding out what's going on.
We've been doing this for a long time,
I know I have painted a sad picture here of Puerto Rico, but the brothers here have just asked to see that if there are really a resistance, and what both of them say is true. In a sense, the masses in Puerto Rico have been able to accept and solve, either individually or sometimes even collectively, but small collectives, have solved the worsening of the situation. And maybe in Puerto Rico, solidarity within the family has worked against solidarity as a larger class. And I have to take, for example, people in Puerto Rico, you barely find a homeless person just as here in Puerto Rico. You don't go homeless. Some member of your family may take you. You don't go and you don't get into the street. So that level of desamparado, of person that has nothing, you don't see it in Puerto Rico because you have the family, you have the extended family, and you have even a neighbor. And that, in a sense, subsidizes salaries, because if you have a daughter or a son who is a college student graduate, who is working in the services sector, who has a salary that cannot afford herself or himself, the family will probably solve all the problems that they have. So that's a way that Puerto Ricans have solved. The other one is immigration. Immigration is really easy. The fact that we have the passports, you can take the airplane and export the crisis to Florida, and the crisis right now is happening, or to New York, because people go there and don't have jobs, and you listen to reggaeton everywhere now. And those pressure release mechanisms do work, but there have been situations where people have seen advances from the government and have weakened. I can say, for example, in the case of teachers responded to the attack on their pensions, but they did nothing against the reducing of the Christmas bonuses. Christmas bonuses were $1,000; they went to $600 in 1 year. Nothing happened against that, but the attack against pension became a major issue in Puerto Rico. So there may be issues who may awaken resistance. The same happens in the university. The university is extremely sensible to everything that happens to them and to others, and that's a good thing. University students are one of the key sectors, and that's why I emphasize both. They are the ones, not only in numbers, but in organization level and tradition. There are other groups, and those other groups may be smaller. That doesn't mean that they're not important. For example, communities and environmental struggle. Right now in Puerto Rico, in the south, there's one huge, not huge in the sense of mass movement, but in the sense of the struggle that is going there against the the mineral carbon company that is exporting the residues of combustion, and they're driving trucks with dust that contaminates everywhere, and that they're taking that to the trash, where they would put the trash, the dumpsters,
Dominican Republic.
and to the Dominican Republic, and that has brought a movement of civil disobedience, and that's a good thing. That's another group that is moving Puerto Rico. Feminism in Puerto Rico, particularly in the university, has awoken. Maybe one of the key aspects of today's struggle within the university is that the leaders are women, are university students, women university students. And they are making as important the issues as women as the national issues. The drive towards gender equality, the importance of protecting and security of women in the university, and that issue has taken a really important aspect within the movement, and that's one of the reasons of the massivity of the movement. Half of the students have always been women, and there are many women interested in the issue. In the last few years, we have seen how gender and sexual orientation has become an issue that mobilizes masses, and we have seen real struggles. The problem with that sector has been that has been easily co-opted by the government just by approving a law, or even some of the businessmen who run the clubs sometimes are the ones who actually organize the movements. So, but still, there are sectors within the gender and sexual orientation movement that have a different view, and that's another issue that may add into what I call a people's fight or a people's struggle, where maybe one sector is the organizer or the key space where everyone is coalesced, and that has happened in Puerto Rico before, and I think that could happen. Problem is that the forces that in the past were the driving force are really weakened right now by the attacks and the effect of the crisis, even in the single militant. Some people, some of us have to have 2 and 3 jobs. And I'm speaking about myself. I have 2 jobs and a half third maybe. And the political organization is probably another one. And you go, and I'm single, but when you look at the single mothers with kids, that gets even worse. So you have the situation has driven many of the militants in many of these organizations don't even want to go to meetings. Don't even want to lose a day on the job, because that costs a lot economically. And I think that's one of the problems we have, that the crisis has hit us so hard that even the moral, the feeling of the people to fight and the will to fight is extremely weakened. I expect, and this is probably negativity in my mind, that the PNP is going to win, and maybe here Donald Trump wins, and maybe they impose the worst scenario, and people will probably reject that. I'm saying this cynically, but in a sense that's what happens sometimes when the PNP wins. People actually awake, and the PPD moves against the PNP just to defeat them, and so that they can govern the next 4 years. But if that creates a movement, and at some point we can actually seize the movement, the working class, not us, but in general the working class and all the sectors that I just mentioned, that maybe then that will move towards a new perspective in Puerto Rico.
Before Emilio ends, we have the food outside, and we're going to have some of your books.
I have copies of my book if you want to purchase it. I would say 3 things very briefly. First of all, Franz Fanon was a psychiatrist, and he said that colonialism was created mental disease. The wretched on the earth. So yes, there is a problem of a colonial mentality. The 2 major sources for a large sector of the population in Puerto Rico survival are federal funds and drug traffic. Drug traffic is holding up the Puerto Rican economy. Not only for the poor, but for many of the rich. And then the third element is, we may not need a plan, but we need a vision. And the people who are articulating a short-term vision of how to deal with the crisis is the petty bourgeoisie, el empresarismo, entrepreneurship. These are the people who are doing stuff. These are the people who are becoming agronomists. These are the people who, let me give you one example of a missed opportunity. A group of Hong Kong merchants came to Puerto Rico and ordered from a slaughterhouse 53,000 pounds of beef. These are cattle raisers there, 53,000 from Hong Kong. Why in the hell would Hong Kong buyers come to Puerto Rico to buy 53,000 pounds of beef? This is in wow. Well, it's obvious that Puerto Rico is within the phytosanitary system of the United States. So we have no mad cow disease and we have no hoof disease. It is quality meat, Angus meat, and it's cheaper than the one in Ohio and Nebraska and those other states. And so these very rich people come to buy prime beef to Puerto Rico. It occurred to no one, except to me, and then again, no one listens to me, to say, okay, let's go to these people and say, first to the Hong Kong people and say, what else can we sell you? And then to the cattle growers and say, how can I help you? And we could become not only exporters of beef to Hong Kong, but to Singapore and South Korea. So that is what is happening. I have a student, a former student, a PhD student, who is now the head of entrepreneurship Olympiads, and they are teaching people how to become entrepreneurs. And the young people in the humanities are now taking classes on accounting and finance because they know that if they are going to be artists, they will have to set up shops and business. So this is one part of the equation. Food is so expensive that it is now profitable to produce food in Puerto Rico. So that's one part of it. The other one is, how do you get Puerto Rico back into global value chains? Puerto Rico has a number of advantages. For example, the baseball cup that plays every 4 years is played in Puerto Rico, not in the Dominican Republic. Why? Because Puerto Rico is a dollar market. And so why don't we take advantage of that? Puerto Rico has many boxing champions. Why do not, and Oscar de la Hoya, who is Golden Boys Production, and Miguel Cotto live in Puerto Rico. Why don't the mayor of San Juan or the mayor of Caguas come up with packages to hold prize fights in Puerto Rico like Las Vegas? This is not the solution, but it is, what does the donkey eat while the grass grows? And so there are a number of initiatives. There are a number of things happening, but they are happening all disconnected. And we need a vision, we need a dialogue. Of course, we're in the 21st century. Visions are not given by a leader, a populist leader that will rescue the country. No. Visions are now developed in a far more complex manner, and that's what we need. What we need is for the people who are the discontents to realize that the old ways of doing business and of organizing people are not working. And we need to organize those who are doing and put them to talk to each other. It may not work, but there are not many choices. Thank you.
For that we have to be independent.
We'll be back.